Hello, this is Ed Rigsby, and we're ready for a Cigar Peg virtual speaker showcase, which is a live showcase. All of the people in this showcase will become nominees for the 2022 Virtual Speakers Hall of Fame. Appreciate you taking the time to be here, and just to make sure that everybody knows, this is a venture of a nonprofit. And all of the speakers that you will see, you will have the ability to connect with them directly. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into it right away. Our first speaker is Chuck Gallagher. He's an American entrepreneur, speaker, and author. He is the author of Second Chances and has been featured in media outlets including Life and Health, Small Business Opportunities, Business Week, CBS, NBC, Lifetime, and National Public Radio. As a business ethics speaker and the author, his clients include Medtronic, the FBI, the U.S. Navy, University of Florida, and over 320 associations nationwide. Chuck is the president of the Ethics Resource Group and the vice president of a public company. I give you Chuck Gallagher.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, every choice has a consequence. On October 2nd, 1995, I took 23 physical steps. And as I took those steps, I thought about my wife, thought about my two children, Rob and Alex. They were just little tykes at the time. I thought about my career. At that time, I was tax partner in a CPA firm. I had testified before Congress, written articles in national magazines, taught continuing education courses in 30 states. I was Chuck Gallagher. I was a somebody. On that day, I thought about the church where I had been music director for 12 years. I literally thought about everything that defined my life. But on that day, as I took those steps, on the 24th step, I reached out my hand, I pushed open the door, and I stepped in to federal prison. On that day, I became 11-642-058, an inmate, what most people would define as a nobody. You see, every choice has a consequence. Now, I know it's a little unusual in a virtual event like this to think about starting off with somebody with a background like I have, but when you think about and you begin the idea of talking about ethics, sometimes it's important to understand why smart people might make dumb choices that could end you up like this. So let me do this. In the time we've got, I want to ask you a couple of questions, okay? First question I've got is, how many of you would voluntarily choose to make an unethical choice? Now, in a true virtual event, we have a way to make this interactive, whether it's chat or via text in most cases, so it keeps some anonymity, but we get opportunities for people to answer the question. Now, most people do not raise their hand on this question, okay? But the second question gets a little more response. The second question becomes, how many of you think that voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Now, in that case, we start to get a few more hands. Okay, but let's play with the third question. Third question that typically comes up is, and how many of you have driven on the interstate highway over the past 2 weeks? Okay, now everybody here is probably going to say, yeah, of course, I've driven on the highway in the last 2 weeks. And sometimes, in fact, most times, if you want to know the truth, you can look out and you can see people that are smiling. It's like they're psychic because they know the very next question that's going to take place. And that is, and how many of you have exceeded the speed limit by, we'll say, 5 to 10? And in most cases, everybody raises their hand. In fact, in one of the last events, there was a gentleman back there, and he said, you know, over 9, you're mine, under 9, you're fine. And apparently he had been a police officer in a former life. But think about the questions that we just walked through. Would you make an unethical choice? Most people say no. Do you think breaking the law is unethical? Yes, except we all do that functionally every day. In fact, here's the truth. It is easy to make unethical choices when those choices seem to be socially acceptable. Now, because of the time that we have, I want to take a little pause. Okay. I want to pause this and say it's important now for us to understand why we're even having this discussion. And here's a true statement. The Department of Justice, over the course of 2022, has had multiple times where they have stated that past administrations may not have been interested in what the rules are and you following them, but we're a new administration and we care. So let me play this out. Basically, the Department of Justice has said, we are now looking. And I'm going to be really candid and say, the reality, since we've lived through a pandemic, is at this point, they're looking and we need to pay attention because it is going to be interesting over the next several years. Now, let me be really practical for a second. Ethical lapses don't start big. That is not true. They don't. In fact, there are 3 primary reasons why people will have an ethical lapse. And in what normally takes place in a virtual event, we're going to peel back the layers of the onion. We're going to talk about why is it that really smart people might make choices that could end up in outcomes that are, well, let's say less than desirable. Now, let me ask this question. Why is ethical training important? There are a multitude of reasons. One of which, by the way, is you probably don't want to end up in, the news media. And of course, everybody today, as long as you've got a camera, you're in the news media when something takes place. Breaking news happens, and we see it every day reported by just ordinary citizens. The other is, by the way, just to be really practical, you probably don't want to end up facing the judge. Now, in a normal presentation, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about what can take place, what the process is that people go through quite naturally that can lead us from a choice that we don't even think about to an outcome that becomes, again, less than desirable. And let me be really practical because I'm going to illustrate this quickly. Number one, we get in our car. We have a need to go from point A to point B. B, we have the opportunity in the car to exceed the speed limit. I mean, the speedometer has, 160 on it. 3, we speed because everybody does it. I mean, it's no big deal. And then when there is no result, when there is no impact, when there's no ticket, we understand, well, we can repeat it. That's a process. But here's something that's critically important as we start to wind things down. And let me make this large enough to be able to see. The United States sentencing guidelines say that if you have an effective compliance and ethics program, it should prevent and detect criminal conduct and promote an organizational culture that encourages ethical conduct and a commitment to compliance. What I bring to the table is the ability to, in fact, create that within the organization. Those are the things that we need to focus on. So in the short period of time we have, I started with a statement and I want to end with that statement. And that is, every choice has a consequence. My name is Chuck Gallagher, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to be with you here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that.